Greetings everyone and welcome to Southern New Hampshire University CJ 104 Ethical Leadership. Today we're going to talk about Module 6's discussion, and I have some suggestions before we actually look at the specific prompt and what's required. And the first is break this discussion down. I would recommend you do it for all of them, but as you'll see in the bullet points, break it down into the questions within the prompt so that you know what you have to answer. The second part of this is a case of needing to use your critical thinking skills. You're supposed to have read Chapter 9. You're supposed to have read the supplemental material. That's the two articles that are in there. One from Time Magazine, the other from with 10 points of leadership. Then you're supposed to do the and the overview, and then you're supposed to do your discussion board. I understand not everybody does all of that, but I'm just suggesting to you that the Chapter 9 is a very easy read. Hopefully you find it interesting. It doesn't have a lot of technical stuff in it. So once you get a grasp on Chapter 9 and maybe a little feel for the leadership article, then you're ready to tackle the article that's involved here. Because what you want to avoid doing, bullet point number 3, is just retelling the story. Okay, you need to read what you're given, maybe do some additional research, and then analyze it and tell me what you think to answer the questions. Make sure you answer all the elements in the critical elements. Excuse me, make sure you answer the critical elements in the rubric, each one of those. I am very mindful of your workload and time management. That's why I've sent out the time management PowerPoint and guide. These two articles, the leadership article, well actually in Chapter 9 too, very clearly will help you get through milestone number 3, the discussion board and all of the assignments. Alright, so let's take a look at the prompt. Following a review of Time's 2002 Persons of the Year article, consider the challenges each woman faced in their respective environment in relation to Gonzalez's sentiment that just because you have the rank of leader doesn't mean you are a leader. So Gonzalez's article is the companion piece. You have to read both articles. This is a fairly meaty discussion board for you. It's going to take a little prep time. This is one you can't sit down and Google. I know that's for some of you a favorite thing to do. You got to come back to the facts in this article. Okay, so there are the 3 women that are talked about. Miss Watkins was vice president at Enron. That should ring a bell. Miss Rowley was an attorney for the FBI in Minneapolis. This is relevant to pre 9/11 information about Mosawi. And Miss Cooper worked at WorldCom, which was pillaged, financially pillaged by the father and I think a son, if I remember. Okay, so choose one of the women and companies featured in the Time article. Conduct additional research and identify new resources as needed, because these are the questions you need to answer. 3 questions. How did the organizational culture at the institution promote or discourage unethical behaviors and whistleblowing? So if we look at the case from Enron, she got the runaround, got moved all over, those kinds of things. So they discouraged it, and the organizational culture was to punish the whistleblower. The organizational culture was to ignore it. Those are the things you need to write about. Number 2, what did institutional leaders do to either perpetuate or prevent these corrupt behaviors? Okay, and so you want to look at that, and maybe you look at the FBI article and you said, well, they did the best they could to prevent these. They investigated it right away. They had a lot of leads and information prior to 9/11. Nobody had a scenario where there would be private planes and paying cash. That's valid. I mean, it doesn't mean they screwed up. Now, you could take the other side and say they did. Okay. What evidence or key decision points can you identify to support these leaders' guilt or innocence in relationship to the corruption? Remember, everything has a decision point. Excuse me. And don't forget also in general terms, but certainly for this, when something goes to your boss and the boss doesn't make a decision and people complain, well, she didn't make up her mind, she couldn't make a decision. No decision is a conscious decision. If I decide not to do something, that's a very conscious decision. Okay, so what happened? What were the key points? Then you can write about. Okay, let's take a look at the last two items that are in the question for you. Following your initial post, reflect on the postings of two or more of your peers and whether you agree or disagree with your peers' assessment of leaders' guilt or innocence. So now you're going to read what your peers said, and based on your reading of chapter 9 and the articles in your post, you're going to agree or disagree. You're going to write and say, you know, I think you're right, but you have to provide some substance to that. Or I think you're wrong and here's why. And the last part is, what could the leaders your peers reference have done differently to better promote high ethical standards? How do you think these examples and your suggestions will influence your particular work in the criminal justice profession and your leadership style? So we've done readings, chapter 9, the two articles. You did some critical thinking and analysis. You wrote your post. You've read others. You've answered it. And now it's kind of where the rubber meets the road, a moment for you to think about it and say, well, here's the way I'm going to be, because leaders come in all shapes and sizes in the organization. Hope that helps you a little bit. Keep the cards and letters coming. Let me know what I can do.